In this episode, we focus on two closely related practices that help security leaders stop guessing and start improving with precision: gap reviews and strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, SWOT reviews. Both are ways of looking at the current situation honestly and then choosing what to do next based on evidence rather than emotion. Beginners sometimes picture security improvement as a big dramatic overhaul, but most meaningful progress happens through targeted steps that address the most important weaknesses first. A gap review helps you compare what you have to what you need, while a SWOT review helps you understand the broader context that makes certain improvements easier or harder. These methods are not complicated, but they do require discipline because they push you to define your goals clearly, measure reality accurately, and then act with intention. When you learn these approaches early, you start thinking like a security program builder rather than like someone who is only reacting to the last incident. Precision matters because time, budget, and attention are always limited, and you cannot afford to spend them on improvements that sound good but do not change outcomes. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A gap review starts with a simple idea. There is a desired state and a current state, and the difference between them is the gap. The desired state might come from mission needs, risk tolerance, legal obligations, or internal standards, but it should always be connected to something the organization truly values. The current state is what the organization can actually do today, not what it hopes it can do or what a policy claims it can do. A gap review becomes powerful when you describe both states in practical terms, like how quickly access can be removed, how consistently logging covers critical systems, or how reliably backups can be restored. If you keep the states too vague, the gap becomes vague, and vague gaps lead to vague projects. A beginner-friendly way to remember this is that a gap is not a feeling. It is a measurable difference in capability or behavior. Once you can describe the gap in plain language, you can start to discuss the cost of leaving it unaddressed and the benefit of closing it. One important step is choosing the right target for the desired state, because the biggest mistake beginners make is comparing themselves to perfection. If your desired state is unrealistic, the gap will always look huge, and the organization will either give up or chase cosmetic changes that do not truly close the gap. A better desired state is one that fits your mission and your risks, such as being able to detect and respond to common attack patterns within a certain time window, or being able to restore critical services within an acceptable downtime. Desired state targets should also reflect constraints, because an organization that cannot hire more staff should not design a desired state that assumes constant manual monitoring. Instead, the desired state might include simplification, better automation, or better prioritization. In governance, this realism is not settling, it is responsible planning. A gap review is only useful when the target state is meaningful and achievable enough to guide real action. When you run a gap review, you want to collect evidence from multiple perspectives, because security capabilities are rarely captured in a single place. Policies and procedures show intent, but tickets, logs, and incident records show how work actually happens. Interviews with teams reveal hidden workarounds and friction points that documents never mention. Metrics, even simple ones, show whether controls are consistent or only occasional. For example, a policy might state that access is reviewed quarterly, but evidence might show reviews are skipped for certain systems or completed without meaningful verification. That difference is a real gap, and it matters because it can lead to inappropriate access staying in place longer than intended. Beginners should learn that evidence is not about catching people doing something wrong. It is about seeing reality clearly so improvements solve the right problem. The more honest the evidence, the more precise the improvement plan can be. SWOT reviews add a different kind of clarity because they help you understand why certain gaps exist and what forces might influence your ability to close them. Strengths are internal advantages, like strong leadership support, good communication habits, or a well-trained help desk that can reinforce security behaviors. Weaknesses are internal limitations, like unclear ownership, outdated systems, or inconsistent processes. Opportunities are external or contextual factors you can use to your advantage, like an upcoming system migration, a new compliance requirement that unlocks budget, or a planned reorganization that lets you redesign workflows. Threats are external risks and pressures, like rising attacker activity, increased vendor dependency, staffing shortages in the market, or business changes that expand the attack surface. The value of SWOT is that it forces you to consider both the internal and external environment, which prevents you from designing improvements in a vacuum. For beginners, it can feel surprising to treat opportunities and threats as planning inputs. But this is how mature programs align security work with business timing and real-world conditions. The best way to use gap reviews and SWOT reviews together is to let each one sharpen the other. The gap review tells you what needs improvement, while the SWOT review helps you choose the most realistic path and timing for improvement. Imagine you identify a gap in incident response coordination. Your SWOT review might reveal a strength of strong leadership engagement and an opportunity of an upcoming enterprise-wide exercise, which means you can close the gap faster by using that exercise to test roles and refine processes. Or you might identify a gap in asset visibility, and your SWOT review might reveal a weakness of fragmented ownership and a threat of rapid growth, which suggests you should prioritize a clear ownership model before attempting complex monitoring expansions. This combined approach reduces wasted effort. It also helps you communicate your plan, because you can explain not only what you want to do, but why it is the right time and the right sequence. That is what precision looks like in real organizations. A common misconception is that a gap review must be heavy, formal, or expensive to be valuable. While large organizations sometimes perform formal assessments, the core idea can be applied in lightweight ways, as long as you are honest and specific. You can start with a small set of critical capabilities, such as identity, detection, response, and recovery, and define what good enough means for each based on mission needs. Then you compare that to what is actually happening and identify the most important differences. Even a small review can reveal high-impact gaps, such as not knowing who owns a critical system, not having tested restore procedures, or having unclear approval paths for privileged access. The point is not to generate a giant report, but to produce actionable insight. Beginners should remember that precision is not about complexity. It is about selecting the right questions and insisting on clear answers. A short, honest gap review can outperform a long, vague one. Another key practice is to separate gaps that are primarily process gaps from gaps that are primarily capability gaps, because the fixes differ. A process gap is when the organization has the technical ability to do something, but the workflow or decision-making path is unclear or inconsistent. A capability gap is when the organization lacks the resources, tooling, training, or coverage to meet the desired outcome. For example, if access reviews are inconsistent because nobody knows who should approve them, that is a process gap. If access reviews fail because the organization does not have enough visibility into accounts and entitlements, that is a capability gap. Many organizations have both, and a precise plan addresses them in the right order. Fixing process gaps can sometimes deliver fast wins because it reduces confusion and reduces rework without requiring new technology. Fixing capability gaps may require investment and time, and it often benefits from strong business justification. Understanding the difference helps you design improvements that match the real cause of the gap. Prioritization is where these reviews become truly valuable, because you cannot fix everything at once, and trying to do so usually creates fatigue and failure. A precise prioritization considers impact, likelihood, effort, and dependencies, but it also considers organizational readiness, which is where the SWOT context matters. An improvement might be high impact, but if the organization is in the middle of a major transition, the timing might cause adoption failure. Another improvement might be moderate impact, but easy to implement with high confidence, making it a good early win that builds trust. Early wins matter because security programs are social systems as much as technical systems, and visible progress makes future improvements easier to fund and adopt. Beginners sometimes dislike the idea of choosing some improvements over others, but prioritization is how you protect the mission with limited resources. A good review helps you justify that choice transparently, using evidence rather than personal preference. It is also important to be careful about how you phrase findings, because wording can either invite collaboration or trigger defensiveness. If a review is framed as a blame exercise, teams will hide problems, and hidden problems cannot be improved. A better approach is to frame gaps as shared risks that the organization can reduce together. You can describe the gap, show evidence, explain the potential impact, and then invite the stakeholders who own the relevant processes to help design the fix. This approach increases buy-in and improves the quality of solutions because the people closest to the work often know which changes will succeed. For exam-focused learners, the lesson is that governance is as much about influencing and coordinating as it is about setting rules. GAP and SWOT reviews are tools for coordination because they create a shared picture of reality. When people agree on reality, they can disagree productively about trade-offs without losing trust. Once you have prioritized gaps, you should translate them into clear improvement objectives that can be tracked. A vague objective like improved security awareness is hard to implement and hard to measure. A clearer objective might be reduce the number of incorrect access requests by improving guidance and training for managers, or increase coverage of logging on critical systems to improve detection reliability. The objective should state what will change, who will be involved, and how you will know it worked. This is where a gap review becomes a program plan, because each gap becomes a project or initiative with a clear outcome. Beginners should also learn to define what done means for each improvement, because unfinished improvements can create half-built processes that confuse users and increase risk. Clear objectives and clear definitions of done protect against endless projects that never deliver stable value. They also help communicate progress to leadership, which supports continued investment. Measurement after change is part of precision as well, because you want to confirm that you truly closed the gap rather than just performed activity. If the gap was about slow detection, you should see faster time to identify for relevant events. If the gap was about inconsistent access reviews, you should see higher completion and better quality in review decisions. If the gap was about unclear incident roles, you should see smoother coordination during exercises or real events. When measurement shows the gap is not closing, the best response is not to double down blindly, but to revisit assumptions and adjust. That adjustment loop is a form of maturity, and it is exactly why these reviews matter. They create a feedback mechanism that keeps the program aligned to mission and risk realities. Beginners should think of this as steering a vehicle. You check where you are, compare it to where you want to go, and make small corrections rather than waiting for a crash to force a change. Running GAP and SWOT reviews is ultimately about turning security improvement into a disciplined practice rather than a series of reactions. The GAP review gives you a clean comparison between current and desired states, while the SWOT review gives you the context to choose the smartest path to close the most important gaps. Together, they help you avoid common traps like chasing trends, overbuilding controls that do not match risk, or trying to improve everything at once. They also help you communicate clearly with leadership and teams because you can explain priorities using shared language and evidence. For a beginner, the biggest takeaway is that precision is not about being harsh or perfectionist. It is about being honest and specific so the organization can invest its effort where it matters most. Over time, organizations that use these reviews consistently become less surprised by incidents and more confident in their ability to adapt. That confidence comes from practice, and these reviews are a practical way to build it.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.